let's get started on today's topic. So one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of right now is there's a lot of people who are talking about how they sort of feel like they're a little stuck in their careers. A lot of UX people who are getting tracked. And when I dive in deeper to try to understand why they feel so stuck, what I've been seeing is that it's primarily because they are only working tactically. They're very much focused on their craft and on production work. Basically, all the things that you do when you're first starting in UX, you just keep getting better at doing those things over and over again. But the problem is it's a bit self-limiting, because what happens is that you get so good at your craft that you actually surpass what is needed by your organization. You get to this point where the organization is actually not appreciating these new improvements that you're continually making to the way you work and how you work and what you're doing. And the result is that people feel very much challenging with the work that they do, because it doesn't feel like there's any further direction to go. It just becomes repetitive. People aren't appreciating the contributions, and this sort of feels like the end of the road for a lot of people. It's why I think a lot of people are talking about being burned out. I think it's why we see people talking about leaving the field altogether. In the mentoring sessions I've been doing, I had a couple of people last week who felt really sort of challenged that their career is just sort of at this point where they're not getting any growth out of it. And this is because their work is almost 100% tactical. It's very much a limit in how just how the day-to-day work it is. I mean, if think about it, when you learn to be a chef, right? You go to maybe a cooking school, or you learn to the discipline on your own, but whatever it is, a lot of it is tactical work. A lot of it is, learning how to be better at slicing onions. You can go take a knife skills class and you can become incredibly great at chopping and prepping really fast. But those are tactical skills, right? They're not the types of skills that are going to make you in the long run an amazing chef, but you have to master them in order to be great. And that's what we do in our field. We get very good at the tactical work, but we don't ever really talk about strategic work. And I hear some people talking about working more strategically, but then when I start to ask them what they mean by that, they're not really 100% sure. And again, that's because we don't talk about this in the UX field very often. The UX field is very much focused on how to be better tactically, how to run better usability sessions, or how to be better at Figma, or how to be better at wireframes or running workshops. It's all tactical skills. And that only gets us so far. And that's the wall that people are bumping into, is that they feel the boundaries of how far that gets them. And just being better at that doesn't get them any farther. And so that's the key thing. So today we're going to talk more about strategy. And the way to think about strategy is that it's a high-level plan that one chooses to achieve some important goal, right? So going back to the restaurant metaphor, if you want to become a great chef, you might have a goal of opening a chain of restaurants, or you might have a goal of earning a Michelin star, or you might have a goal of just running a restaurant that everybody just wants to come and have a good homemade, or something that feels like good comfort food every day, whatever it is. And the strategy is the high level plan for getting to that goal. It's the steps that you need to get to that goal. And so we use a strategy to help us communicate what it is we're trying to do to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve. And organizations as a whole need solid, well-defined strategies, but the individual groups within the organization also need strategies, right? One can think of an organization where you've got a sales team and a marketing team and an HR team and a finance team and a product team and a development team and a UX team. And all of these teams, even though they work for this organization, they all report in to the organization, into the senior executives of that organization. Each one of these has a strategy. Sales has a strategy, which is basically a high-level plan to make, to bring in sales, to bring in more money. And marketing has a strategy. Their strategy is to build awareness, or to, in the case of, pretend that says awareness. In the case of a sales, lead-based sales, to actually get leads to come in. HR has a strategy, which is to make sure to build, capability within the organization. And finance has a strategy to keep the organization financially fit, to make sure that there's more money coming in than going out, to make sure that when things get a little rough in the market, that there's reserves to bank on, to make sure that there's goals to do. And all of these things are in service of the organization's goals. The organization can have a goal which is something along the lines of, say, trying to expand into new markets, or trying to roll out a new product, or maybe to grow through a merger or acquisition. And all of these things have to be in play for that to happen. Sales has to be producing revenue. The finance is going to then sock away to give people investment, which is going to build capability, or require that the HR department build capability, and marketing is going to need to get sales the leads that they need to be able to produce this effectively. Over here on the product side, we're in the world of actually producing products, right? So product has to have a strategy about producing things that customers want, and making sure that they get delivered on a schedule. That's what most product folks focus on. Development is about, actually, their strategy is figuring out effective ways to build it. This is why things get agile. And then there's, the UX strategy. And there's got to be a strategy there too. And the question is, what is that? Right? What is the UX strategy that is focused on what it is that we're trying to do, how it is we're trying to work. So that's the idea, is can we get the strategy necessary for what is required to do the work uh, um, uh, and to be effective, and that's key, right? What we're really trying to do here is we're trying to get ourselves to a point where we are delivering the uh, uh, the organization what they need. Basically, what we're talking about is that every organization has to sort of muster all of the resources, the capabilities, the people, the skills, the talents, the experiences, the knowledge, the tools, everything that they're capable of, right? Sales puts together all of the sales resources, capabilities, knowledge, experience, people. Marketing puts together all the marketing resources, marketing capabilities, marketing uh, 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 talent, marketing experience, marketing knowledge. All of that is there, right? And all of these things happen in this form. Each group basically says, okay, as a sales group, how do I contribute to the organization's goals? As a product group, how do I contribute to the organization's goal? And what we're talking about here is, as UX people, as our UX group, as our UX team, as our UX effort, whatever you want to call it, how does that contribute to the goals of the organization? And this contribution is key, and we bring real value as UX people that nobody else brings to the organization. We bring a perspective that changes how people think about what the organization is trying to do, because our strategy makes the organization more human-centered. Nobody else is thinking in those terms on a day-to-day basis. So that's part of what we're trying to do, right? We're trying, in essence, to think about are we human-centered? And that's key here, right? That's the key piece of what we're trying to do, is to become the voice of making the rest of the organization to have this human-centered perspective. Now, one thing that we should talk about is how strategies are different. So strategies are different in essence than tactics. Tactics are very much the low-level activities that we use to get things done, right? If we're talking about the restaurant space, the tactics are slicing onions and poaching eggs, right? You have to be able to do that to be able to cook the meals you want to be able to cook, but they are very much in the situation of they're just the things we do, right? Creating Figma files, being able to create wireframes. By the way, there's a really good new book that A Book Apart just came out with on wireframes. I read it in pre-production. It's fantastic. You know, running usability tests. These are all tactical things, and they're fine, right? We need to be able to do them to get the work done, but they are not strategic. There's nothing about them that's strategic. They will not help us from a strategy standpoint. In order to be strategic, we have to focus on the goals. right? In essence, we have to focus on the outcomes that we want, because these are all outputs, right? They're things that we deliver into the world, but it's the change in the world that we want to see. That is the key here, right? So this is what we are actually trying to achieve, right? You know, these are both things we're achieving, but the outputs are just things we deliver. Outcomes are change. We don't achieve them until they are actually very much the change in the world. And so that's what we're talking about, right? And so tactics for the rest of the organization, they have tactical stuff too. I mean, the salespeople are off trying to open new deals and qualify leads and produce proposals and close deals. Marketing team is producing marketing collateral and trying to collect up qualified leads and all the different things that are happening. So these are the tactics, but the strategy is which deals do we go after, and do we focus on particular types of structures? Do we leave some on the table? And those things are very dependent on the situation that we're in. And when the market changes, when the competition changes, when the economy changes, all of these things have to change along with it. And so it's all of these changes that we need to understand. And so this is really the crux of it. What makes strategy different from tactics is that strategy is situationally aware, whereas tactics is situationally agnostic. By that I mean, it is the case that tactics don't care what we're doing. And poaching an egg doesn't matter what kind of cuisine you are, or whether you're making it for dinner or for breakfast. It's you make a poached egg the exact same way, no matter how you poach the egg. And all of these things don't matter what kind of product we're working on, or whether we're working in a nonprofit situation or working for government or any of these things, right? It doesn't take the situation. It doesn't care about the economy. It doesn't care about any of those things. The way we run a usability test, the way we create wireframes, it's basically the same no matter where we're working, what we're doing. And that's tactical work. And if all you do is focus on tactical work, it's going to be incredibly frustrating at some point, because it never changes. It's the same no matter where you go. And it's like you could be the world's best onion slicer, but it's never going to be better than what you're doing right now. So you're never going to be able to get beyond that. And so these sorts of things are what create the difference. So now the question becomes, what is in fact a UX strategy? So if we think about the strategy as being all the resources, tools, people's knowledge, experience that we can bring to bear towards an organization, that UX strategy is going to be all the UX knowledge, all the UX resources, all the UX expertise, all the people and skills and tools that we can bring to make the organization goals better, because or to achieve the organization's goals, because we have made the product better. We have made it a better, more human-centered, better designed product or service. And so we need to understand who's involved, what the goals are, what the strengths and weaknesses of our organization is, what the competitive landscape is, the context of the work. All of this comes together for us to understand what our strategy needs to be. So you go from one organization to another, you will find they could be complete competitors in the same exact market. They will have vastly different strategies. I mean, you can see this in the phone market, right? Apple's strategy to phones is incredibly different than Samsung's strategy to phones, even though they're the two big players in that space. And so we need to understand what is very much going on in that regard and what that is. Tactics will not change. Tactics will be the same at Samsung as they are at Apple, but the strategies are going to drive what's different. Strategies work on more of a experimental sense and respond fashion, whereas tactics lend themselves to best practices. But there are no best practices for strategy. You cannot say this is the best strategy that any company can have, because it's just not how it works. And so the problem that we run into is that we often start with tactics and we never get to the strategic part of our work. And that creates all sorts of issues because no one in the organization sees us as contributing to the strategy work. So one of the biggest complaints that I hear in the mentoring sessions that I've been doing is they're not bringing us in early enough. Well, why would they bring you in early enough if they see you only as a team that delivers tactics? You have to be a team that delivers strategy in order to be there. You have to have strategic value, which means you have to be working at a much higher level than what methods, when, and where. So that's the sort of key introduction to strategy. Now, one thing I want to clear up, because there's often confusion between UX strategy and product strategy. Sometimes when I hear people saying, well, what I want to do is put together a UX strategy, what they're actually talking about is a product strategy. And they're similar, but they are different because product and UX are different, right? The product strategy is all around figuring out what customers want. What is it that they're going to pay for? What is it that's going to deliver value, specifically in terms of a finished product? And because product strategy is very much based on that finished product, it almost always centers around the product roadmap. The product roadmap is basically the organization's to-do list of what it's going to deliver in terms of features and capabilities. And it's almost always specified in those terms, features and capabilities. And just like marketing goes out and finds leads for sales to actually then reach out to and see their interest and develop the sales process, UX and product need to work together, because while product is thinking in terms of features or capabilities, we think or we should be thinking in terms of experiences. What are the experiences that our customers and users are having? And so the experiences go beyond the products or features and talk about how these things actually improve their lives. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because that's the core of a UX outcome, right? A UX outcome answers the question, if we do a great job, how do we improve someone's life? The way we're going to improve someone's life is by delivering them capabilities and features that actually provide substantial value. So the work that we do and the work that product does are very similar in that regard, but they're focused on figuring out what that list of features or products is, while we're focused, or we should be focused, on figuring out what the experiences are and how those experiences will change. A UX outcome is an outcome, so it's about a change in the world. And in particular, it's about a change in the world that improves the lives of the people who use the product, the people who are buying the product, if they're different than the people who use the product, the people who are affected by the product because someone else used it, they might not even know the product exists. You see this in a lot of sort of B2B to C type scenarios. So there are all sorts of things where there's places where we provide value and product provides value, but the lenses we look through are completely different, because at the end of the day, they need to provide a list to development. They need to schedule out what gets done in what order, when. They need to figure out what's in scope, what's out of scope. And we can give substantial strategic input to that by helping figure out exactly what customers value, because it's based on what people need to improve their lives. And that's the big change in what we're talking about here, that we are really sort of focused on this idea that we are providing a lens that's different than anybody else provides, just like marketing provides a lens that's different than anybody else provides, and finance provides a lens that's different than anybody else provides. But we're all focused on the same goal. And so when we're talking about what our UX strategy needs to be, our UX strategy needs to be what brings the organization closer to achieving its goal. Now, one of the myths that I hear, and I hear this when I talk to people in the mentoring sessions, is that their organization currently doesn't have a UX strategy. And that's not true. You always have a UX strategy. But when you're 100% focused on tactics, your strategy is completely reactive. You basically wait until somebody asks you to do the thing, and asks you to create the wireframes, asks you to produce usability recommendations, asks you to create a library of Figma files. So all of these things are basically the default strategy when you just focus on tactics. And again, it's why things like, why don't they bring us early? It's because none of those things require that you are brought in early, or at least that's their perception, because that's what we taught them. You know, as I've said it before, we often teach people that UX is like dealing with your dry cleaner. You don't think about your dry cleaner. You don't plan to bring your dry cleaner into discussions about what you're going to wear to the wedding. You don't do any of those things until you pull out the suit you want to wear and realize it has a stain, and now you have to rush it to the dry cleaner to get it dealt with. And that's because the dry cleaner has set themselves up to basically be this service that just does dry cleaning. And we don't think to involve them earlier. They know what everybody wears to everything. They are probably experts in that. They could probably give us incredible insight into how we could look smart at the wedding without showing up the bride and the groom. However, they are not asked. They're not brought in because they are purely seen as a tactical service. And so our UX strategy has to start by getting out of being reactive. We have to be out of this mode. The other day, I found a sort of way to sort of show what this is, right? So let's say we're working on in a sprint format or some sort of time box thing, right? So there's a start, where we figure out what we're working on in this particular time box sprint thingy. And then at the end of it, there's an end date, and that's all determined before we even get involved, right? We're gonna be invited to participate in this sprint at the beginning, and we have to have whatever we contribute done by the end. All of that's been pre-decided. And so here at the beginning, we discover what it is we're working on. And at some point in this process, there's going to be the identification of an important decision. And it's that decision, right? Do we do it this way? Do we do it that way? And suddenly that decision requires that we fire up our UX research machine, and we're going to do some amount of research. It's going to take some amount of time during this time box sprinty thing. And this is where all the research is going to happen. And then we deliver our results. So this is the moment where we figure out what it is. We deliver our recommendations, and hopefully there's enough time in here for us to actually get this done. But the problem is that our decision makers get impatient, and they want this to be faster. So they ask us to cut it down, and we try to cut it down as much as we can, and we cut out, as you know, anything we think is fluff, but there really isn't any fluff left in this, because this whole thing is what, 2-3 weeks, and so there's no fluff here. So we end up just guessing, right? So that's when we get ourselves into trouble. Somebody ends up guessing. Either we guess or the stakeholders guess because they're tired of waiting for us to produce our results. And now we've introduced a tremendous amount of risk. And because guesses don't always turn out right. They turn out, how many times have we delivered something that we thought was brilliant into the world and nobody used it? So we know that guesses don't always turn out well. And so as a result, we get stuck. If we want to be strategic, what we want to do is we want to figure out what that decision is way up here. And we want to actually start the research way before that decision has to happen. And I did a whole session on this. We call this 0-day decisions. And the idea is to get the amount of time between when the decision is identified and when the stakeholders are in the place where they can make it, that we want to get that down to 0 days. And the way we get that down to 0 days is we actually come up with a strategy that has us do the research in advance. And that is a strategic approach. Getting research ahead is a strategic way to think about how we produce more value for the teams, so the teams can move faster, so that what they build is based on less guesses and based on more understanding of who the users are, what the users need, what their current experiences are like, and what their future experiences could be. And this is what we mean when we talk about reactive and proactive. Everything that's happening in this part of the sprint is reacting to the decision. This is all reactive. And everything that is happening in this part of is proactive. So now we are becoming proactive in advance of the work. And it turns out this is doable, but you can't just do it without having a strategy to get you there. And so that's what we talk about in terms of putting together a UX strategy. It's about thinking through, what do we need in order to do things like get decisions down to 0 days, or influence the roadmap, or making sure that the organization is mature enough that the first drafts of any designs that get produced are drafts that have a decent user experience to them, right? Putting together a design system so that the developers can make good design the path of least resistance, versus starting with poor design as the path of least resistance and then having to have UX people who just go cleaning up messes all the time. That's a strategic approach. So our UX strategy is often going to be changes in our internal process to make sure that we deliver better products and services. But that's not that weird, because the marketing strategy might be changes in their internal process to deliver better leads, or the sales strategy might be changes in the way they qualify customers to make sure they spend time with the customers who are most likely to make the largest purchases. This idea of focusing strategically on ourselves is how we become a much better adaptive organization. So our strategic first steps are going to be to understand first, what is it we're trying to achieve as an organization? What is preventing us from delivering the best designed products and services? How would better designed products and services help the organization's overall goals? If the organization is trying to get more sales in Latin America, what do we need to do to get more sales in Latin America? If we're a government organization and we're trying to reduce the burden on the citizen who is trying to use government services, what do we need to do to understand what the burden is today and how we can make it better? So all of these things are key. We start with understanding what the organization's goals are. We ask the question, how would better UX actually help the organization achieve those goals? And then we focus on the idea of what does it really mean to get the organization in a place where what we're doing is producing the most proactive, most effective approaches to doing this. And it's basically a series of baby steps, right? What are the baby steps we're going to take into account? And we may need to increase maturity across key parts of the organization. Okay, we can put the baby steps in place for that. Now we fall back on our tactics, right? We want to increase the amount of UX research that's getting into product decisions, getting into development. That will then go back to tactics. We want to start influencing key upstream decisions, like what products are we going to build next, or what features are we going to build next, or how long should we have for each of those sprints, or what the ship date's going to be. All of these things that are sort of upstream decisions that are often cast in stone by the time we find out about them because we're working reactively. All of those things are going to require that we start to find out what the people who are making those decisions need, so that we can have the information ready at the time they need to make those decisions. And all of these things are how we upgrade the experience that we're going to have. And so the first steps are going to be unique to your organization. No two organizations in this room, even though we've got probably 200 or more represented here, no two of them are going to have the same first steps, because no two of them are going to have the same strategy, because the situations that those strategies live in are not going to be the same. So it's going to be unique. But what it is going to be is it's going to start with understanding what is the high level goal that we're trying to achieve. Are we trying to get our restaurant to have a Michelin star? Or are we trying to be that corner bar that just has all the comfort food that people want when they don't feel like cooking themselves, right? Whatever it is, we're going to need to adapt our first steps to that strategy. And once we learn how this works, it changes what we bring to the organization, because we are no longer just bringing our tactical craft. We are now contributing to a strategic approach every day. So the most effective UX leaders are focused on providing strategic benefits. They do so by supporting the organization's goal, by asking the question, how would better UX help the organization succeed? And then mustering all those resources, knowledge, experience, capabilities, expertise, tools, people, skills, how all of those things will help the organization deliver a better UX, with the end goal of being completely hyper-focused on improving the lives of the users, the customers, and all the people who are affected through our products, basically through better design. And that's going to be very much dependent on the situation that you're in. No two organizations are going to do the same. Even in parts of the organization, they're going to be radically different. And your organization is going to change, or your approach to this is going to change when the situation changes. And this is far more rewarding than just continuing to improve your craft in a world where nobody notices the improvement, because now you are having really meaningful work by actually focusing everything you do on improving people's lives. And for experienced UXers, this is the next right step. And if you're just wondering how you're going to get that started, the way that you're going to get that started is by becoming a UX leader. Now, we talked last week about how leaders and managers are not the same thing. That managers, you have to wait to be appointed by your organization. But to become a leader in your organization, you just have to have a compelling vision. And that compelling vision is how you're going to help the organization become more strategic, how you're going to help your UX team become a more strategic player within the organization, how you're going to get that strategy to focus the organization on delivering more value to customers by really improving their people's lives. And so now, when you are at that point, when you are able to do that as a UX leader, you're going to have the influence in the organization. You're going to be able to influence those decisions in a much better way. And because of this, you're going to win over stakeholders who, for the most part, have basically sort of just thought of you as the dry cleaner in the UX department, just the people who make it pretty, make it easy, right? And not the people who actually are thinking about how does the organization overall succeed. And to do this, to become that UX leader, it's just a set of skills, just like the tactics were a set of skills, but it's a different set of skills. And it's not a set of skills that we talk about in the UX world very often. And once you learn what those skills are and you get a chance to practice those skills, you start seeing results immediately. Jared here. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you'll get more videos like this. If you have any comments, questions, or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, consider joining our Leaders of Awesomeness community. It's completely free, home to over 50,000 UX leaders who regularly share questions, ideas, inspiration about their experiences. The link is in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.